If you have a spiritual illness, it's pretty hard not to have a mental illness. And potentially vice versa. I mean, if you have a really bad anxiety disorder, do you have a spiritual disorder also? Probably you're existentially pretty freaked out if you have a very severe anxiety disorder. If you have a severe depression and you feel purposelessness or meaninglessness, you likely have a severing of a spiritual connection inside of you to a grander purpose of being.
Welcome to the Self-Care Goddess podcast, where healing stories, practical self-care strategies, and science-backed tools to regulate stress, feel calm, grounded, and energized come together to help you reclaim your vitality. I'm your host, Rita Savoya, holistic nutritionist, trauma-informed breathwork coach, and founder of Breathwork Barista. This podcast is for women who are ready to restore their energy and radiance, reconnect with their bodies, reawaken their inner power, and redefine self-care as a way of being. Through science meets soul practices, restorative mind-body tools, and real stories of transformation, we'll explore how true well-being can help you live with more joy, vibrant health, and authentic connection to yourself and those you love. Take a deep breath in, let it go, and let's begin. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Self-Care Goddess podcast with today's theme, Integrative Psychedelic Therapy for Mental Health and Empowerment. Super excited to have our guest on today, but as you know, before we begin, let us tune out the outer world for just a couple of moments and tune in with ourselves here on the Self-Care Goddess podcast. If you feel comfortable and are able to do so, you can lower your gaze or even perhaps close your eyes and just tune in to your breath. So allowing the inhales to come in through the nose, expanding the belly, the chest, and then letting it out through the mouth with a slight sigh. So in through the nose, extending those inhales, and then letting it go with maybe extending the exhales a little longer than the inhales with a slight sigh. So opening your mouth just a little bit, allowing those exhales to flow out of your body, and with it, bring the tension, the stress, the anxiety perhaps that you no longer want. Let the exhales carry it out of your body. In through the nose and out. I invite us now to allow the inhales and the exhales to flow in and out of our hearts. Where attention goes, energy flows. So let's energize this beautiful organ that's keeping you alive. And as we continue those heart-focused breaths, I invite you to visualize someone that you're grateful for today. Visualize this person as if they were right here in front of you, and I invite you to send them all the love, the gratitude, and the appreciation for being in your life through the good times and maybe the not so good times. And now I invite you to send this love, gratitude, and appreciation towards yourself for being here, taking some time out to tune in. On your next inhale, slowly flutter your eyes open and come back to us. Thank you for participating in that quick coherence technique from the HeartMath Institute. So today we have Keith Kurlander. MALPC. He is the co-founder of the Integrative Psychiatry Institute, the largest professional education company specializing in integrative mental health and psychedelic therapy, listed in Inc. 5000 as one of the 100 fastest growing startups in the US, top 10 in healthcare and top 3 in education. He also co-hosts the Higher Practice podcast for optimal mental health and co-founded the Integrative Psychiatry Centers, a clinic revolutionizing mental health care with cutting-edge psychedelic therapy and integrative psychiatry treatments. With over 20 years of experience in psychotherapy and coaching individuals, couples, and families, Keith's journey began after nearly committing suicide at age 19 following a psilocybin mushroom experience. His battle with severe mental illness persisted into adulthood until he overcame it through decades of trial and error. Now a successful entrepreneur, Keith is passionate about teaching methods that can eradicate mental illness and empower people to reach their full potential. Thank you, Keith, for being here and taking the time to share your experience, your journey, and your wisdom with my community. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, I spoke a little bit in the actual introduction, but can you maybe walk us through a little more about your journey and what has really inspired you and motivated to be doing what you're doing today?
Sure. I would say that I'm primarily motivated by my own suffering, as many people are in some ways. I think there's other motivations too, but I think primarily my motivation and drive in my way I serve in the world has been through being driven by wanting to alleviate suffering in myself. And from that, I think experience, many people, especially healers, we find compassion and empathy for that experience in others and want to help. And I think that's been really the bulk of my journey has been, wow, like, does it really have to be this way? Does it have to be this hard? Is there a faster path to relief and to healing, maybe is a better word, for others that, doesn't have to be a multi-decade process of trial and error. And that's what led me to where I am today.
Yes, thank you. And oftentimes, yes, on this podcast, it's people's pain to purpose, mess to mission stories that have really inspired and motivated them to, hey, if it worked for me, I can really inspire someone because it can work for anyone. So I value that your vulnerability in sharing your story. So, what are some healing hacks? Because you mentioned that you healed through trial and error. And basically, this is why I love talking to people like you, is that we can really collapse timelines or really avoid some of the mistakes that we've made and share those hacks, tips, techniques, frameworks for mental illness. What would you say?
I would say there's 5 core areas, keys from my experience and my learning and studying and research and working with people. And I would say the 5 areas that you're moving toward, and we'll say where we're moving from in a second, is purpose, embodiment, connection, self-care, and transcendence. I would say those are the 5 core things that we're attempting to move toward that creates a healing experience. For purpose, we're moving from sometimes a sense of meaninglessness, a lack of meaning. From embodiment, we're moving from an experience of trauma. From connection, we're moving from an experience of isolation. From self-care, we're moving from an experience of neglect. And from transcendence, we're moving from an experience of ego. And I would say that has what I've sort of learned and synthesized now after 30 years of really intensely trying to figure this thing out. And when you're, walking that, I haven't given the hacks yet, but that's the framework. When you're walking that path, if you are actively walking inside of each of those areas of that bridge, you start healing. There are hacks to move across each of those bridges that are different, but you start healing and you start becoming more whole and remembering who you are.
So beautiful. So beautiful. So do you
Yeah.
find from your experience and years of doing this that there is a certain bridge that people are most often wanting to cross or needing to cross, or are they sort of, it really depends on the person, on the circumstance?
Well, I think it's a puzzle that, first of all, without really good guides in our life, I think we're often wandering in the wilderness without a compass. And so I think that what's more typical is that we start lost in the wilderness without a compass or a guide. And we're tripping over logs and getting in fights with animals, and, it's scary and confusing, and we don't even know where we're going. Where are we in the jungle? We don't even know where we are. We don't even know that there is any order in the jungle, which there's a ton of order in every ecosystem. Systems have a ton of order in them, but we don't see it. And then to answer your question, certain people will find themselves more focused typically in one of those 5 areas at first, but integration is going to mean walking that bridge in all of those areas from my experience. Integration. There's other ways of being well in the world that isn't always about integration. That doesn't work for me. But yeah, I think you have to walk each of these areas to be an integrated human being.
Right, right, right. And would you say you would start somewhere, or it doesn't really matter? Because the way you sort of explained it, and we can get to this question a little later as well, is that that ego, that transcendence is for me maybe the last bridge to cross, and do the other ones first, or no, it doesn't really matter.
I think it does matter. I think you're right. I would agree that you would start somewhere. Now, I think that if you have a good guide or guides, you're actually walking every bridge. And it might sound like, whoa, that's a lot. How do I do that? But it's not a lot, and you're in an actual day to walk each bridge. Like, you can take care of yourself every day. You can work toward connecting with people every day. You can work toward being embodied and mindful. You can work toward your purpose and align your behaviors there. And you can work toward the dance of ego and transcendence and working toward a connection outside of yourself. So I think that you can do it all. And I think the starting point is a starting point inside of each of those areas. So I think there is a starting point, and it depends. You may be more developed in one area, and maybe it needs to be less of a focus because you're actually really developed meditator. You've been meditating for 15 years and you get to all these kind of crazy transcendent states, and you're able to walk through the day and mostly detach from or non-attach from a lot of experiences, but yet you're still kind of miserable and your body's really unhealthy and you actually don't have good social connections and you actually don't feel that purposeful, but you're pretty good at just not attaching. So yeah, I think that some people have developed some of these areas and would need less of a focus, but they're still happening. They're still doing it. They're just a little further along in that area. And so certain areas might need more of a focus for people. Typically, for people that are really unwell, typically they're not on purpose. They don't have great self-care and they're disembodied. Like, usually those 3 are just happening, and that's real. I think the most pervasive issue among anything is trauma out of these 5 areas. Disembodiment trauma, which is a presence disorder. It's a disorder of presence. I think that would be the most pervasive thing, and probably a starting point for many people that feel really off. Would be to do embodiment practices and also potentially trauma work.
Right, right, right. So when you talk about the psychedelic or the guide and the mentor, is it the psychedelic experience, the therapy, or is it actual somebody that you could talk to, like a coach or a therapist?
Yeah, that's another good question. I mean, so right now I'm not even I would say psychedelic is a tool. among many. And actually, it's not a tool you'll use that often. In reality, most people don't, and probably shouldn't use it that often. So I would say that's a tool. So that no, when I say guide, I'm referring more to the helpers in your life. Now, that might be a medical provider, that might be a mental health provider, that might be a spiritual provider. It might be just sort of like your next door neighbor who happens to be a guide, a mentor. Um, but having the right mentors is important. And when we're ready for the next stage of development, we will draw in those people. We will naturally draw in the people when we're truly ready for the next stage of development.
Mm-hmm.
That happens. I believe that. I've seen it over and over.
Right. Having the right network and listening to podcasts like these to get an idea, or if you're feeling off in any of those areas. So, did we mention the hacks? No, the healing hacks.
Get to the yelling. That was your first question, which is really key. So you have the frameworks. So healing hacks, again, I think they're really different depending on the areas you're working on. In self-care, let's start there. I think the most important thing is exercise, sleep, and diet. This is a These three areas are a major issue, particularly in the United States and also in some other countries. But we've definitely by default, when you look at least the stats in terms of the general population, we've become very disconnected from what food to eat that's healthy for our body type. We have become disconnected from exercise, generally speaking, for the amount that we need to be healthy. And our sleep is messed up. The most simple thing we could talk about are those three areas. And so the hacks there, I would say, is very like grandma would tell you this kind of thing. It's like you have to learn how to eat for your body. And that is not the standard American diet that was, told to us for the last, whatever it is, 40 years or whatever. The food pyramid is mostly not healthy for people the way it was designed. I mean, the hacks is like we have to go learn how to eat. And it's actually simple. It's like low to moderate carbs, unless you're needing a lot of carbs for some reason, like you're a power lifter or something. We need healthy proteins, healthy fats, lots of vegetables. This is a diet that's not simple to achieve for most people right now because we're trained to something else. So I think a hack there is like, get online, use chat, listen to podcasts, learn about how to eat healthy. You don't need a lot of money to eat healthy. There's also sort of a stigma or a thing like, well, I don't have enough money to eat healthy. And it's like, no, you can. Like you can spend that same amount of money you're spending on fast food to buy some simple things in the grocery store that will be 1,000 times healthier. That's not really true. Maybe you don't have enough money to get the super fancy nutritionist or provider. That's true. But you can eat simply and healthy. Exercise is, the same thing. It's like there's certain people in physical labor positions that naturally get the labor they need. And historically, as you go back through time, before industrialization, most people did have that level of exercise. We are now disconnected from that, generally speaking. Not everyone, but generally speaking. So our bodies are not designed to not have that level of physical exertion to stabilize them. That feedback loop is necessary. So that is also somewhat simple, but a little more complex for people who aren't in positions where they're forced to work physically very hard, because we do need strength building exercises for our body, which means likely being in a gym if you aren't in a physical labor position as your job. So that needs to get taken care of. Strength training and cardio, these are very important for our well-being. And then sleep. We are more and more over time forgetting how to sleep properly. Our bodies are. I mean, hacks there are, there's a lot of hacks. I mean, but this is nothing new of, around screen time at night and a dark room and a colder room versus a hotter room. And if you wake up, wait 15 minutes and then get out of bed and wake up the same time no matter what in the morning. Try to go to sleep the same time. Like this isn't my hacks, but those three things I would say is foundational and very within
Many, yes.
they're more within your control than like, okay, go meet a partner. That's harder in a certain way for some people. Go meet a partner that you're gonna have this great connection with, or go discover your purpose and act on it. Or like these things could be harder. Like, but these three elements are like behavior change is hard, but it's definitely within your control.
Agree. Yeah. And it's interesting, Keith. I created the foundational 6 pillars of self-care. And yes, mindset, breath work, of course, sleep. I call it sacred sleep, metabolic flexibility. So nutrition, joyful movement. So you're not just going to the gym once a day for an hour. It's like incorporate that joyful movement. And it just kills me how people, when they go to the gym, they're like trying to park at the closest spot next to the gym entrance. It's like, no, park further so that you incorporate that just movement, take the stairs, all of these things, right? So yes, a lot of them are very much in our control and foundational too. And it's just like, if we would say these things to our grandmothers, they would be like, what are you guys, crazy?
Yeah, because they were just having to do that. I mean, we have a lot more from innovation and things. There's just a lot more luxury is the best way to put it, that removes us from having to do some of these things. Yeah. So that's the first thing. I mean, is it a hack? It's a foundation. It is a hack of like, start there for sure. If that's not dialed in, that is dialed in, move on. We could go through it all, but then let's look at the other things if that's dialed in.
Yeah. I love that. So it's almost like that hierarchy of like needs, right? Maslow's hierarchy. Like, so get the foundational stuff, right? So that you can focus on the higher level development, right? But I am interested in talking more about the psychedelic therapy and how that comes into the picture. And maybe you can talk a little more about your experience. And was that the last trial that you had, or just walk us a little bit through your psilocybin experience?
So I was 19 when I did psilocybin. For the first time, I'm turning 50 this year. So quite a bit of time ago. The experience was at college and I was intrigued and took it with a friend and ended up alone in my dorm room. Ended up extremely overwhelmed, in a lot of pain, total psychic overwhelm, and ended up in the realization that I was like, I've always been in this pain. This doesn't feel new to me. And it's so horrible how I feel inside that the only solution is to kill myself. And I was in a apartment building, a dorm room, but it was dorms, but it was, these were like 22-story buildings. And I was toward the top and went to the window and I was going to kill myself. And I had a vision of my 5-year-old sister at that moment, where she started talking to me and saying, like, you can't do this. And it's not about you. Like, you can't do this for me. And I, like, in that moment, like, I had a catharsis. I was like, okay, I can't do this because of you. And I walked away being like, well, this is a problem because I'm really screwed up. I'm really in a lot of pain. So since I can't do this, now I only have one option, which is somehow I have to figure out how to deal with this pain. But I have no idea what this is about. I have no idea what the pain is. So that was my first experience. Since that time, I had many other experiences. I have not done many psychedelics in the last 10 years, but I've done psychedelics many times over the last 30 years. And I would say that psychedelic therapy, which is what it would have been great if that's the first experience I had with psychedelic therapy with a guide, I would have integrated quicker. So psychedelic therapy is a tool that disrupts the stuckness when it works well. It disrupts the stuckness that we're in. It can biologically help us and reduce some symptoms through biological mechanisms that we're struggling with, but it can also psychologically and spiritually disrupt us so that we can actually see the world in a different way. If the way we were seeing the world was working for us, we would be moving about our day and fine. So it can disrupt that process, and it often does. And then it's an amazing tool for disruption, to seeing the world in a new way that perhaps either in the moment or later is a much broader, wider, more integrated way of experiencing our lives. And that can happen, and it often does. So it's an amazing tool for that. And it's also a powerful tool that shouldn't be taken lightly, as my story shows. It needs to be done carefully and with the right assistance.
Right, right, right. Would you recommend, if it's so powerful, to everyone, or is there a certain person you have to be prepared for? Do you have to have the intention set? Or would you say that, hey, pretty much psychedelic therapy is everyone's a candidate for it?
Everyone's not a candidate for sure. I mean, there are contraindications. It depends on the medicine. There are different medical contraindications based on the type of medicine. There are psychiatric contraindications, schizophrenia. It depends on the medicine. There's others depending on the medicine. So it's not for everyone. But with that said, it's for many who feel like it could be useful for them. Those contraindications is not a massive amount of people. So it can be right for many people.
I agree. I agree. And when you talk about that disruption, what are the mechanisms that cause that? And maybe we can just choose psilocybin here, the mushroom experience. What are the mechanisms behind that disruption that it allows for?
Well, I would say we know some and we don't know a lot.
Yeah.
There's a network of brain regions, the default mode network. And when that is loosened, is a term we could use, when it's softened and altered, we're able to move from rigid structures of interpreting the world. And that happens often. Again, each medicine's different. For instance, MDMA for PTSD or trauma, there's some other functions that happen there with the amygdala and some inhibition in the amygdala, which is one of the areas of the brain that's responsible for fear and our fight and flight system. It can actually suppress that enough that we can actually address internal states without overwhelming fear. There's other aspects of it, of just, there's the mystical parts of this. And again, this still might be related to the default mode network and other networks. There's people that could sort of theorize way better than I can about the neuroscience. And we know some things and we know a lot of stuff, but
We don't know.
but then there's this having a mystical experience. If we talk more psychologically right now, that can really change a person, where we see beyond ourselves for the first time, connect to either divinity or nature or something outside of ourselves, where the confines and limitations of self fall away. It can be a dramatic experience for a person that can be very positive. There can be a scary part of that, but ultimately, I would say the research demonstrates that many people say that's one of the most important experiences they've ever had in their life. These medicines, including psilocybin, can cause us to look at traumatic memories, and traumatic memories are not only cognitive, they're visual, they're sensory, they're non-descriptive sometimes. These medicines often amplify those, which is what happened to me. And that can be extremely useful. So I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yes. No. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm really fascinated by this. And what are your thoughts? Is this why it's illegal, or now obviously the climate in the US and Canada and North America is changing for sure. But what are your thoughts on that? Why
Well, if you look at the history,
Mm,
I think you kind of have to look at the history of psychedelics.
mm,
So, I mean, first, if you go far enough back, we see a lot of use or some use indigenously,
mhm,
either as a spiritual ritual or a medicinal
mhm,
treatment. Um, and then, so that's indigenously. And then you see some psychedelic use historically in religion and pockets or some different areas through the world. But then if you fast forward to, let's say, the 1940s, 50s, 60s, we start to see psychedelic research. We have LSD being discovered. We start to see psychedelic research. Psilocybin gets introduced to North America. And sorry, not North, to the United States specifically. Um, it was already being used in Mexico and elsewhere, but we see that getting more culturally used. And then in the 60s, there's research now flourishing in the 50s,
wow.
therapy research. And then we have in the 60s this massive cultural experience, a revolution that also is associated with psychedelic use.
Mm.
And then what happens is we have a backlash. The government comes in the United States and some other countries too, and says, wait a second, this stuff isn't safe. People are killing themselves. And also, I think we're losing control here.
Mhm.
We're losing control. And so then you have drug reform and these things become Schedule I substances. Research stops. Then there's another wave, a small little wave when MDMA gets rediscovered by Alexander Shulgin. He resynthesizes it, and then it goes into this pocket of therapy for a little while. That gets into Schedule I. And then we just have this suppression for a while of psychedelics with a ton of cultural stigma from the 60s of like, it's dangerous. These are gateway drugs.
We're against drugs.
More against drugs. And then we get to, and then alongside of that, we have different people, mainly though, starts with MAPS and Rick Doblin, who then is like a champion for MDMA research for PTSD. He takes that on. And then we see this huge resurgence of research around really the turn of this century, 2000s. In the last 20 years, we get some real research going for psychedelic therapy, and the cultural attitude starts to change for the first time, really since the introduction of these substances into Western civilization, Western society. And now we have a change now where culture is beginning to change enough so that in the United States, we have states that are passing psilocybin, legislation left and right. We have phase 3 FDA trials on psilocybin, on MDMA, many phase 2 and phase 1 trials on other substances. We have other things in other countries passing things. We have Australia with psilocybin MDMA that's passed for medical use, more nuanced stuff in Canada. You've had in Amsterdam for a while, psilocybin truffles. So it's changing right now. We're watching the change right now across the world and in the United States rapidly. And it's a cool thing to see. But what's really cool about it is a large part of the change is about the therapeutic use of these substances. A large part of the cultural change is that these things have therapeutic use. And people are like, I think I would say people are open because I think there's more of a recognition, more and more of how much we're suffering. And there's recognition of that. And we're not getting the answers from the same sources that we've been trying for thousands of years now. Like, it's just not solving all of these problems. And so we're like, okay, maybe this thing has some merit. Let's check this out.
Right. So where do you see the future going? Where are we headed, in your opinion?
With psychedelics?
Yeah.
It seems pretty clear to me at this point, and I would say many people would probably agree that I think in the next 10 years, we'll see some FDA approval. So where the drug is actually a drug that a medication that you'll go to your doctor and get prescribed. And we'll see some of those. We'll see many states in 10 years have state level approvals. We'll see many countries more and more doing the same thing. I would say in 10 years, your neighbor will likely have done psychedelic therapy, or someone you know. Let's not say your neighbor. Someone you know will likely have done psychedelic therapy. In most parts of this country is where I would say we'll be in 10 years.
Yeah, very, very possible. So you talked a little bit about integration. So you have the experience, and then what happens after the experience? How important is the integration process?
Yeah. So, and maybe just a quick distinction of psychedelic therapy versus recreational psychedelic use. Psychedelic therapy is sort of, there's a structure about set and setting, the mindset you enter with, and the setting you're in. There's a structure to it, and it involves a trained facilitator basically the processes. There's preparation before. There's the administration or dosing session that you actually takes the medicine, and then there's integration after. Recreational use is I'm taking a psychedelic, whatever context I'm in, whatever the reason is, but it's recreational use. It's not about that I'm having this thing to go work on this issue in myself and I have a form. If it's that, it's not recreational use. It's something, right?
Right.
So those are two different things. So coming back to your question, preparation, you get prepared. We could talk about that, and then dosing, and then integration is what happens afterwards, which is that you've had this big experience. We've all had big experiences in our life. Psychedelics sometimes happens to be one of the bigger experiences of our life. Typically, they rank in the top 5. But we have this big experience, and if you don't want it to just be a memory of a big experience and actually integrate it into something usable, we need integration sessions and integration work where we take the memory of the experience and we take that memory of the experience and we turn it into something that changes us going forward, not just through a memory, but we actually use that material and we make changes. And that's integration.
And what sort of tools can you use to integrate? Of course, having someone professional to guide you through it, but is it talk therapy? Is it breath work? Is it other modalities?
It can be a whole list. It could be talk therapy. It could be breath work. It could be journaling. It could be art therapy, artwork. It could be contemplation and meditation. It could be somatic therapies where you're going into more of the body's sensations and trauma work. It could be coaching and more goal-oriented work where it's like behavior change. How am I going to actually shift the behavior I've been struggling with for 30 years that I know I need to shift? I've accepted it on some level, but I also know I need to shift it. So it could be that. So I would say there's a big list, but I think the key is knowing that that's important. Knowing that integration is important is really key. If someone is going down the road of exploring psychedelic therapy, that the real change happens in integration. The experience happens during dosing, but the change happens during integration.
Exactly. And typically, how long is an integration program?
So if you look at the different medicines,
depending.
It does matter. So like, for instance, if you look at the MDMA protocols, that's a long haul. It's not a short window. It's multiple sessions over multiple months of dosing sessions with many preparation sessions and many integration sessions. And it could be 3-6 months of integration. And then psilocybin, technically you could go to your therapist, have this session, have 1 or 2 integration sessions and technically be done. Ketamine tends to be a little longer, like a month-long process. But at the end of the day, also, it's like it depends on the person. They could be in like a therapy process of integration for months or return to it on and off for years. integrating the experience.
Right, right.
Many people do return to an experience years later. When I was actively practicing therapy before, this was I started in 2005, 2006, when it was just sort of rising, but not really. Like people weren't talking about this stuff as much. And people would come to me and they'd be talking about integrating psychedelic experiences from 10, 15, 20 years ago. They would just bring it up and be like, and we'd be integrating an experience from 20 years ago. So I think it's a process, but when you think about the actual just like therapy, it's typically like this window of like weeks or a couple months, like typically in terms of like the technical process that finishes.
Yeah. So I actually support iboga plant medicine retreats in Mexico. And we do a pre with the breath work. So we open them up right before the actual ceremony. And then after the first ceremony, do the breath work as well. And finding that very, very useful and helpful to open them up during the actual experience. And then I'm actually working with another company that they're doing ketamine-assisted therapy, and they want to bring in breath work as part of a modality for the integration program. And you're right, it really does depend on the medicine itself.
Yeah. So, what how'd you get connected to iboga?
What? Sorry?
What happened? You got connected to iboga?
What happened?
Like, how'd you get connected to that medicine?
In Mexico, actually. Yes. There was a fellow from Canada, actually, just really randomly, where I got certified for breath work, was like, hey, Rita, are you in Mexico? I'm like, yes, I am. And we were actually on the same coast. So it ended up being so random, but now it's been a couple of years where I'm supporting his pre and then integration process as well. Yeah. Very powerful plant medicine for sure. And with the
it's a rigorous
plant. Yes, it's the grandfather plant. Yes, the root. Yeah, getting you very, very to the root of what is happening. But there's a lot of veteran programs, U.S. veteran programs, where they're sending their veterans to do this plant medicine to help them with PTSD and other mental health issues. So thank you. This was really, really insightful. I loved how you explained things, really very articulate. I do want to touch upon, before we wrap up, just the connection between mental health and spirituality. And we kind of sort of dabbled into it in terms of that bridge, that last bridge there that we talked about, the transcendence. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I thought a lot about it. Have you thought a lot about it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Especially more recently as well. And the more work I do, I mean, I was in HR before I got into the wellness world. So I was always about, personal development, personal growth, potential. What's my potential? And not just that. And then also helping people reach their potential. So I feel like spirituality is along that same spectrum. Is, the more you connect with yourself, inner knowing, inner wisdom, the more you can connect with your potential and live that highest vibrating life, because we all deserve to do that, right? So yes, I feel like there is that connection, and it's always kind of been ingrained in me. And now into the holistic world and psychedelic world. I mean, when I first started this podcast, Keith, I had no idea I was going to be talking about plant medicine and psychedelics.
Okay.
And now I just feel like the universe is always bringing these amazing guests like yourself to talk about this. And it's just like, yeah, I do want to, it's another modality, right? Another modality to help yourself heal and connect with that higher knowing. But yes, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that we've tried really hard to separate these things. When I say we, I mean, I think that culture and systems and medicine and have really tried to separate mental and spiritual, mental health and spiritual health. And mental health, you'd have to sort of look at the timeline of the last 150 years to understand where the concepts of mental health have come from, because we didn't have these concepts of mental health 150 years ago of what we have today. We didn't have the concepts of the same exact concepts: depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, bipolar, schizophrenia. Like these concepts 150, 200 years ago, like that's not how we viewed each other in everyday living, of like having this categorization system of how we struggle mentally. So it's a very new sort of phenomenological experience of each other, relatively speaking, to the last 10,000 years of humanity. And if you go back, obviously further. So it's fairly very new. We sort of relate this way. And so then what happened alongside of this creation of sort of the categorization of how we suffer mentally, what happened was there was sort of a pulling apart of spiritual health, and that they're two separate things, right? And that we sort of have spiritual, like is sort of spiritual religious, and then we have like mental medical. And so these are sort of like became separated. But really, I think ultimately we're just talking about the internal landscape of our experience and how we see and feel and think about the world around us. And it's hard to draw a line of what's spiritual and what's mental in terms of mental health, spiritual illness, mental illness. They're very related, but they're ultimately, we can draw some distinctions, and some of it's useful. But if you have a spiritual illness, it's pretty hard not to have a mental illness. And potentially vice versa. I mean, maybe not as much vice versa, but potentially the same thing. Like if you have a really bad anxiety disorder, do you have a spiritual disorder also? Probably you're existentially pretty freaked out if you have a very severe anxiety disorder. If you have a severe depression and you feel purposelessness or meaninglessness, you likely have a severing of a spiritual connection inside of you to a grander purpose of being in the world. So I would say they're very related, but there are some things that you can play with intellectually that can be helpful to distinguish the two issues, where it's like, well, we could look at the biology of the body that's actually impacting and causing some of these mental dysfunctions. We can look at the mind and sort of say, well, is the cognitive way we're thinking, the thoughts like, and our self-concepts hurting us? And then we could sort of separate out and say, well, how are we working with our transcendent experiences, trying to connect to those? Because those also affect everything. So I think it's like there's overlap, there's some distinction, but ultimately we're just trying to answer the question, how the hell do we just feel okay in this world? So it sort of doesn't matter. We're really just like, how do we just love our life? I mean, that's really what we're just trying to figure out, whether we call it mental health or spiritual health. How do we love the experience we were given here? And that is a art and a science and a discipline to get there. And no one probably stays there perpetually. I mean, go in the spiritual realms, they'll tell you that there are people that do, and maybe they do in some way. But I think ultimately we're just trying to not to live a good life, feel a good life, experience a good life,
and live it to our ultimate potential, and really
reach our potential given whatever constraints are around us. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a great question. I've thought a lot about it, and I think it's an important question for people, and you can find people that get too hung up in any framework is the problem. Really, we can get overly identified with any framework,
right.
And that can cause problems.
Yes, I agree. To remain flexible and malleable, and that things are going to change, priorities are going to change, life stages will determine what's more important, what to prioritize. So yeah, I agree. Do you find that people, I'm talking about now the psychedelic therapy, they get addicted almost to doing the work?
Some people, but I actually think, well, when you look at the research, not so much. That doesn't tend to be an outcome, but you're also talking about people that are, it's a very like rigorous process to go through to get into the research and like.
Right.
But I would say, yes, there are people that they feel like the only way to heal is to continue to go back to experience psychedelic experiences over and over and over.
Right.
I'm not talking about microdosing right now. I'm talking about macrodosing, like actually having a full-blown psychedelic experience. There are people that will do that. It's not that common to like addicted, quote unquote, like because it's such a sort of rigorous thing. But there are people that will think or feel that that is the only way to heal, or it just seems like that's the path to keep going back, keep going back. I'd say largely that, there's something probably about their ordinary state of consciousness that they are struggling with changing and shifting. And so they go and they are actually preferring the altered state of consciousness. But the thing is like when we do psychedelic therapy, it's not in order to prefer the altered state. It's actually to impact the ordinary state. That would be the goal. Yeah, I think you can get stuck there. It happens. I wouldn't say it's common, but it definitely can happen.
And then if you do too many of these experiences, then you're not giving yourself time to integrate as well. The reason why I ask is it's very common in Mexico where I go for the winters for people to be like every weekend doing some sort of experience. And for me, that's just, you're not giving yourself that time to integrate. And what I love about the iboga plant is that, hey, you might just need this once and then go live your life. Like go out there and really integrate and live the life that you're meant to live, right? So yes, I do feel that some people, maybe wherever you're at, and if it's easily accessible, then you kind of get addicted to being in that altered state versus that ordinary state. So
assuming that the altered state is more pleasant.
Yeah, exactly.
And, the harder journeys, if you're the type of person that 9 out of 10 times you do a psychedelic and it's just like a harrowing, just hard journey, you probably aren't going to go there that often.
That's true. That's true.
But then there's another type of person where actually it just doesn't happen that way that often for them. In fact, there's the type of person where they take psychedelics and not that much changes. And they just keep trying and trying. It's a different pattern in a person.
So what would be a piece of advice that you would give someone listening or watching this and sort of, intrigued about going into psychedelic therapy? What would be one piece of advice?
I think that I would say find someone near you that, first of all, find someone that has done it. Psychedelic therapy would be great. Find someone that's actually done psychedelic therapy, talk to them. And then I would say find a practitioner to go talk to about it and go and explore it. And I think that if you're drawn to psychedelic therapy for whatever you're struggling with, you should go check it out and learn more and see if it's right for you. And it might be the best thing you've done. And don't come in with too many expectations because you might have a hard time and think it didn't work. But any good integration therapist working with you, it's you like, well, let's wait and see. Like, just because it's hard doesn't mean it didn't work.
It's true. And I love just be patient and sort of watch out for signs and the universe giving you signs that maybe perhaps it's time, either whichever medicine is calling you. Because I came across this type of work like 15 years prior to actually doing the medicine. And it was just sort of always sort of creeping up and coming to me. And then I was actually scheduled to go to Peru and do an ayahuasca retreat in 2020, March 2020, booked it and everything. And then the clinic or the center emailed me and said, listen, you might get stuck here. And I should have said yes, because I would have came back as a Shaw woman, being stuck there over COVID. But I was like, nah, then, I'll do it another time. And I didn't do it till 2022. So but I was exposed to it 15 years prior. So it was all about timing as well. So kind of, if this is your first exposure to listening to a podcast that is talking about psychedelic therapy, definitely do your research and don't jump into it.
Yeah, do your research.
Definitely need to be ready for it.
Yeah.
What is
listen, like you're saying, just listen closely.
Yeah. So the guides,
I mean,
whatever's
something might be guiding you, and you can trust your intuition and, pace yourself.
Agree. So what is the best advice that you've ever been given, Keith, that still holds true today?
I've been given a lot of advice. One piece of advice that was very impactful when I was 21, I was working for a car rental company out of college, and I was in a deep conflict around purpose. And one of the customers, I was like the sales rep or whatever. I just was talking a little bit about, she was asking me questions, and we were in Vermont, and I was talking a little bit about myself. So she said to me, one thing you never have to worry about is the money will come later if you follow your purpose. And I think that was a really impactful piece of advice when I was 21.
Beautiful. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I know you've read many, but what is the most influential book that you've read?
Most influential. Well, I'll just stay with that age for the moment. When I was like 20 or 21, I read Way of the Peaceful Warrior. That was a kind of big moment for me too. It's semi-fictional, but it's a fun read for someone who's just beginning on a path of discovering themselves.
Yes, yes. And what are your top 3 non-negotiable self-care habits that you do on a daily basis?
I wouldn't say I do them on a daily basis, but exercise, nutrition, and sleep, the pillars.
Foundational pillars.
I would say those are the thing I'm committed to attempting to have met on a daily basis.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what is your legacy, Keith? What do you want to be known for?
I would hope that I move the needle some imperceptible fraction of that. We suffer a little less in some way by something I'm sharing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you. So if our listeners and viewers want to connect with you, stay connected with you, and perhaps want to know more, where's the best place?
So our company's website, which is psychiatryinstitute.com, is a great place to go check out. That's the Integrative Psychiatry Institute's website. That's great if you're a provider for programs. There's also other material on there. And then the Higher Practice podcast would be a great place just for listening about what we're talking about and many things around mental health and spiritual health and discovering who you are and reducing suffering.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this very insightful, enlightening, heartfelt conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for making time and space for my community and just sharing your journey, your story, and all of these beautiful little nuggets that you shared with us today. I really,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Care Goddess podcast. If today's episode inspired you, share it with another woman who's ready to reclaim her vitality and lead from within. To continue your journey, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with me on ritasavoya.com. Until next time, remember, self-care isn't selfish, it's your superpower. Take a deep breath in, exhale, and keep rising. Ciao for now.